Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. Today our topic is Real Estate Investing for Beginners, Q&A.
Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast with Scott Whitwam, your blueprint to financial abundance. Settle in as we explore the mindset and methods for wealth building through real estate.
Welcome back. I'm Scott Whitwam. I'm glad you joined me for today's Real Estate Investing Beginners Q&A. This is a continuation of our last podcast. Today I'm going to be taking investor questions from beginners, and we have a running list of questions that we've received, and we'll go through some of them again today. So let's jump right in. The first question I've got is, what is the difference between a fix and flip strategy and a buy and hold strategy? This is a really good question because many times investors who are just starting out get this confused. In fact, many years ago, I had a very well-educated investor. He was a CPA. He understood numbers, understood obviously money, and he wanted to get into investing in properties to make rental income. He'd moved out here from the East Coast where I'm at, and so I started coaching him on the process. And to begin with, he had a real hard time grasping the difference between kind of a flip mentality and a buy and hold mentality. And a lot of times, first-time investors, beginners, they'll have their flipping experience or the knowledge they got from watching maybe a television show, some network that is doing, like HGTV, who's doing, how to flip a house in 30 days or whatever their program is. And they'll see the process done, and then they'll think that that's the process you use with every type of investing that you're doing, and that's not the case. Because if you take a flip mentality into a buy and hold, you're going to lose opportunities. And if you take a buy and hold strategy into the fix and flip world, you may not make any money because fix and flip, you have a margin that you have to have in order to make a profit on the short run on the property. So for instance, let's say that you have a property that has a $500,000 after repaired value, and it needs $100,000 worth of renovations. Well, now we know our basis is $400,000, but now we've got to build in a couple other things. We've got to build in the closing cost to acquire the property and the closing cost to sell the property. And then we've got to build in the profit margin. So on a buy and hold property that may have a $500,000 ARV that needs $100,000 worth of work, we may need to be able to purchase that property around $300,000, $325,000, maybe $350,000, whatever your requirement is for profit at the end of a transaction would determine that. And we teach, obviously, in our coaching programs how to work those numbers backwards and how to use that to negotiate. So on a fix and flip, your acquisition price has everything to do with your ultimate profit on the other end. Now, for a buy and hold, that's not necessarily the case. Typically in the buy and hold world, we're looking at rates of return. So let's just say, for instance, that your rate of return that you need to make cash on cash is 10%, and you go out and buy a property for $300,000, you're going to want to make $30,000 or $2,500 a month in rental profit on that property. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not the house is worth $300,000. If it's producing $30,000 a year in revenue, that's what's important. So, for instance, in our scenario, the first scenario where we bought a house for $500,000, that house the house has an ARV of $500,000. If we're looking at buying and holding that property, what we have to do is we have to work back what the rents are in the area. So if the rents in the area are, $3,500 a month, $3,000 a month, whatever that is, then we can work backwards to the percentage of rate of return for the acquisition, closing costs with our cash on cash. If you're financing it, you got to figure the financing into the transaction. So there's a lot of differences, but we're not necessarily looking simply at getting the lowest acquisition price so that there's some margin at the end. What we're looking at is getting an acquisition price and repairs that return us the rate of return that we need. So it's a different strategy. And if everything you're looking at in the buy and hold is based upon ARVs and what we can acquire things for, you're going to miss buy and hold properties that actually fit into your portfolio. We had an investor come to us and said, "Hey, we need to make 6% rate of return on our money for for buy and hold." And a lot of times we can find properties that there's no way that you can pay that much for it on a fix and flip side, but on a buy and hold side you can, because we don't necessarily have to put granite counters and porcelain tile and all these things into every buy and hold property. So again, totally different strategy. And if you approach it properly, there'll be profit in the fix and flip and the buy and hold, but you can't use one strategy for the other because you're going to miss some opportunities along the way. All right, next question. How can I assess the risk involved in real estate investing? This is a good question. Risk assessment is very important. And one of the big things for beginners that I recommend is that you find a good home inspector, somebody who is very knowledgeable, preferably somebody who was a builder at one time or a contractor at one time, somebody who has experience. A lot of times people get into home inspecting because they saw they could take a course. They were working at the grocery store, decided they'd get into home inspecting because they saw an ad that said they could make a lot of money in it. But they don't have any practical experience. They've gone through they know some of the basic stuff to look for. But I like to work with and recommend that my beginning investors work with a home inspector who's got experience in either construction or in building, because they're going to see things that may not be typical. They may see something and go, "Oh, this is indicative of another problem, and let me go check and see if that other problem exists." And so one of the biggest things to mitigate risk is to have a good home inspector. The other thing you're going to want to do is build relationships with other trades. As an investor, it'd be good if you had a roofing company that you work with. I know that from working with roofing companies that I have some that'll come out and do roof inspections for me for free, because they know if I end up having a roof issue, that it's likely that they'll get the job. So they're willing to put in some work. Otherwise, you're going to find that if you hire specialty contractors like, some of the pool companies, some of the roofing companies, and even the AC companies, they're going to charge you a service fee for coming out. But you want to develop those relationships and use these contractors in your process so that if your home inspector goes, "Oh, we got a problem with the AC split," or your heating system isn't producing as much heat as it should, or the volume of air isn't correct, you can bring one of those contractors out in order to take a look at it, and it doesn't cost you a bunch of money up front to do that. Especially if you're in the process of negotiating the acquisition of the property to reduce your risk. You want to use whatever you can. Obviously, on the commercial side, we do some different things. We'll do some environmental studies, a phase one, and hopefully, depending on what the prior use was, we don't need to get into phase two inspections. But we'll do whatever we can to mitigate the risk up front with regards to the condition of the property, the condition of the house. And the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. But I think I've said this before, I still use home inspectors. I'm a contractor. I have guys who work for me in my contracting crew. In fact, one of my employees is actually a former home inspector, and he's been in construction for 40 years. But a lot of times I will send an independent set of eyes out there that's not connected with the company and not going, "Hey, we want this project because, it looks good to us and we could use the work and the profit's all there." Sometimes a home inspector will come back and you'll go, "Yeah, we really didn't consider that." They'll find stuff that we kind of just overlooked as we went through and we're pretty thorough, but every now and then they'll come up with something that we missed or we want to consider. So home inspections are very good. Do your due diligence and mitigate your risks. Next question. Should I manage properties myself or hire a property manager? I get this one all the time. Now, if you have one rental property, it may be easy for you to be your own property manager, especially if you happen to buy the house next door, right? So it's really easy. But what if you buy a property in another state? You're certainly going to want a property manager. I would think somebody local who can go check on the property, who can do drive-bys for you, can do periodic property assessments, walk through the house, make sure they're not putting holes in the doors and destroying the house. Many people do their own property management. I have several investors who I've worked with over the years, and I have one that has, I think he's got 10 or 11 properties now that we've helped him acquire, and he does all his own property management. He's retired now, but he wasn't then, but he enjoys doing the property management himself. He does a very good job of screening up front with credit checks, with rental history checks and stuff. So he does his own property management. I do some of my own property management, but a lot of times I will put a property manager in between me and the tenant. And the reason is because I found that I'm too nice of a guy when it comes to being a property manager. And many times I've gone to a property to do a visit to collect rents that weren't paid, only to find a single mom whose husband had left her, and she's got 3 or 4 kids. Kids are all little and hungry, and so I'm going to Safeway and buying them food and bringing them back food, asking them how long they think before they can, So sometimes putting a property manager in between you and the people that are renting makes it so that you can be a good property manager. You can be their friend, but the property manager can be the hammer. They can be the one that basically enforces the contract for you, gives the notices, the eviction notices, sets the process. And most property managers are pretty attuned if you do have to do an eviction in the process. I've had to do a few of them myself on my own. It's not something I enjoy doing, but, it's part of the process. And for me, it's sometimes better to have a property manager. Some property managers won't do that kind of stuff. So if it comes to eviction time, they're actually going to turn the file back over to you in order to handle. And you can negotiate with property managers their fees and what they're responsible for. So for instance, on a property that I have managed by a property manager, if there's anything that's considered a major repair, that gets turned back to us because I'm going to send my crew out to do the work on it. But if it's something simple, generally they have handymen on their phone list. They just call a handyman. He goes out, handles it, and they just send me a bill. So if you're just getting started and it's only one property, maybe doing the property management yourself just so you can learn a little bit and then make the decision about whether you want to hire a property manager in the future. That would be not a bad course to take. Okay, next question. What legal aspects should I be aware of when investing in real estate? All of them. The reality is there's a lot of legal issues that can arise in a contract. Even if you're using an investor contract that's pretty simple. I have 2 real estate attorneys, 2 different law firms that we use depending on the issues we're dealing with, whether it's commercial or residential. There's a lot of aspects around the inspections, contingencies, when are they fulfilled, when are they not, days on contract, when did they actually expire, when do they don't, what things require a cure notice to give the other party an opportunity to fix a potential breach. Those are some big legal aspects to be aware of. And when you're investing in real estate, we're talking about some fairly substantial values that we're dealing with. Now, if you're wholesaling, a lot of times your contract is built in such where you can defer a lot of the legal aspects and cancel and get out of something if something starts to go sideways. But I think it's really important that we consider the legal aspects, especially if they're in the midst of a foreclosure. What if the seller is in a bankruptcy? And sometimes it may be good to have an attorney on your dialing list so you can call them up on the phone and just say, hey, I just need some quick advice. The other thing is if you're buying properties off MLS, I know a lot of investors do, especially when they're starting out, they're trying to do buy and hold, and they'll be buying off the MLS. Get a good realtor who has years of experience that understands investing. If it's a small, boutique type brokerage, just to say they're under 30 agents, and the broker has a lot of investing experience, sometimes you can have an agent that may not have as much, but you can rely on their broker to be able to guide them and help you with some of the legal aspects, help you with the contractual aspects. You want to have a full, toolbox of experts who can help protect the legal aspects. And know your contract, the contract that you're using as an investor. If you're doing stuff with a realtor, they're going to want you to use whatever state contract there is. If you're, one of our investors in our program, we're going to recommend that you use a much more simple but very, complete contract that'll protect your interests and give you the ability to get out from something if you think you're hitting some legal hurdles that'll become too experienced to make the investment worthwhile. All right. Next question. How do I perform due diligence on a potential property? I think we covered this a little bit, but the reality is you want to make sure that you inspect every aspect that's important to you. So, for instance, I'll have my home inspector, do the inspection, and then I will review the home inspection and say, hey, he had some marks in there about the pool, so maybe I want to get a pool guy out. He had some questions about AC, volume of air splits, heating differentials, those kind of things. Maybe I need to get a heating specialist out, take a look at the property. Maybe I need to get a foundation specialist out to take a look at the property. If I'm looking at doing a lot split on a property, so let's say I'm acquiring a property that, whether it has a house or doesn't, but maybe it's got a house on it, but the lot's big enough I can split it, I'm going to want to do some due diligence down at the city or county and find out what it's going to take in order to split this thing so that I can now have two potential lots, one that maybe we rehab, sell it, or rehab and put a tenant in it, and then we build on the next one, or we sell the other one off to finance that one. But we want to do all that diligence up front. You're going to get to where you understand zoning, and that take a trip down to the zoning office, down to the planning department, get a chance to talk to them. Most jurisdictions, now when you get into some of the bigger ones, it's a little bit busier and maybe not have as much time to provide you a lot of advice. But my experience is most of them, even in bigger cities, whether you have to have an appointment or not, they'll answer a lot of your questions with regards to, hey, can I build on this? What size lot? They'll direct you to where the code compliance is, and you'll be able to read it, and it'll say, hey, you can have 50% coverage, 25% coverage. You can have maximum or minimum size on it, and just do your diligence on the property up front. It'll save you a lot in the end. So I don't know how it happened, but we're out of time. How quickly time flies when we're doing this. I still have a whole bunch more questions that you beginners have sent in to me, and we'll get a chance to take some more time in the future, answer some more of these questions, and get them knocked out. We want to see you be successful in your real estate investing, and we want to take the time to give you the tools so that you can do that. That's what we're about, is about helping you advance your real estate investing career. You've been listening to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. I want to thank you for taking time to listening. And if you found this episode about investing beginners Q&A helpful, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. We just might answer them right here on the podcast. You can always find the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. This is Scott Whitwam. Be sure to join me on our next episode of the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast, where we're wealth building through real estate.